Okay, we are now live, everyone. Can I ask for your attention during the meeting, please? Thank you. Welcome everybody to the meeting. Can I remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded and streamed? Now there are public speakers for the first application, one joining in person. We have Mr. Compton over there and Mr. Pugsley online. Could we just check that you can hear us, Mr. Pugsley, and can speak to us?
Yes, I can hear and speak to you.
Thank you very much. Also I need to tell you that this time we have a couple of visiting members who are not part of the committee but very welcome to ask questions and give their views. They're seated over there. It's Councillor Virgo and Councillor Gore. Thank you for attending. Are there any apologies or members joining remotely, please?
I've received apologies from Councillor Karim and Councillor Eggleston is online.
Thank you very much. Can I ask whoever is online to make sure their microphone is switched off, please? And that's the first thing. When you're invited to speak, please remember to turn on your microphone before speaking and off again afterwards. Thank you. I should also remind you that only committee members in the room are permitted to vote on items, and they can only speak once in debate. The visiting members are not allowed to vote, but they will be invited to speak, of course. Are there any declarations of interest on the items shown? Councillor Smith.
Yes, Chair, I need to declare an interest in item number 7. I've provided professional services for the applicant within the last 2 years, so I have an affected interest in that item. I will withdraw from the meeting during that item, but I will return for the following item if somebody's able to come and get me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I should also say that item 6 has been withdrawn because we were, oh dear, I've forgotten where that is. I think it's here.
We were able to deal with refused under delegated powers.
Oh dear, I'm sorry. I wanted to. Anyway, we were able, because of some information that was supplied to the officers, some technical information, we've been able to delegate the decision to the officers. Councillor Barnard.
Thank you. Not for this meeting, expediency of time, but Chair, can you seek to inform members what that additional information was by written response, why it was withdrawn, what additional information was provided, and if, as a consequence of that, there are lessons learned for similar future applications? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnard. Of course we will. Thanks. We had the apologies. Did we have any apologies? We've done that, yeah. So item 2 of the minutes to approve the correct record, as a correct record, the minutes of the last meeting of the 17th of August. Are there any questions of accuracy or statements, please? No. Well, I propose that those are accepted as correct record.
And I'd like to second that, please.
Thank you very much. All in favour? Thank you very much. Okay, we've skipped to we did the declarations of interest. There are no other declarations of interest, are there? No? Okay. Items of urgent business.
There are no urgent items of business, Chair.
Thank you very much. So we move on to our first application, the Mushroom Castle application. It starts on page 23 of your reports and is subject to public speaking. So, but the first thing is we've got to have the officer report.
Yes, good evening, Chair.
Thank you, officer.
My name's Jo.
Could you switch on your... Just hang on a moment. No, not yet. It'll warm up.
Apologies. My name is Jo Mail, and I'm presenting this first application, which relates to Whitegates, Mushroom Castle, Winkfield Row, and was subject to a committee site visit on Saturday. Can I draw members' attention to the supplementary report circulated yesterday and to the fact that a further 6 objections have been received overnight? For clarity, the total number of representations received on this application is 114, comprising 111 objections, 2 letters making general representations, and 1 letter of support. The latest objections cover issues identified within the main report and the supplementary report, and in addition stress the importance of green spaces, such as this site for pollinators, the need to use previously developed land for new housing, concerns about the displacement of cars currently parked in the turning head in Gardeners Road, and a concern about the officer's report to committee, which is considered to give no weight to the facts or the level of objections received. This application relates to a site which extends 1.98 hectares and which is currently occupied by a 2-storey dwelling, associated outbuildings and surrounding land, some of which has previously been used for agricultural purposes. The current access to the site is from Mushroom Castle, a private unadopted road. Mature tree cover surrounds the site and is protected by tree preservation orders. A group order protects the oaks along the site's northern and western boundaries, together with a further oak located centrally within the site. A row of poplars beyond the site's eastern boundary is also protected, together with a sycamore and 2 oaks immediately adjacent to the site. A woodland order covers the area to the west of the proposed access road from Gardeners Road, this area here. The site lies beyond the current settlement boundary in an area of countryside. However, as can be seen from this aerial photograph, it is adjoined by development within the existing settlement on 2 sides and is separated from the open land to the west by the mature tree screen, which is subject to the tree preservation order. The adjacent land was granted planning permission on appeal for use as an area of suitable alternative natural green space, or SANG, to serve an extension to the Warfield Mobile Home Park, which will provide public access rights. The site has been considered suitable as a residential allocation within the emerging local plan and is identified as a potential housing site known as Wink 15 in policy LP4 with a suggested dwelling capacity of 42 units. The examination hearings into the new local plan have concluded and the inspectors have identified a series of main modifications which are required to make the plan sound. None of these main modifications relate to the inclusion of the site as an allocation, and therefore weight should be given within the decision-making process to the fact that the emerging local plan has identified the site as suitable for housing. The application is submitted in outline form with only the matter of access to be determined at this stage. The issue of access looks at the suitability of the access being taken from Gardens Road to serve the proposed development of 42 units, the position of the internal access roads within the site and not for determination at this stage. A subsequent reserve matters application will be required to cover issues of layout, external appearance, scale and landscaping. An illustrative layout has been submitted to show how the site could potentially be developed. The purpose of its submission is to demonstrate that the proposed number of units, in this case 42, can be accommodated on the site. It's not for determination at this stage. The illustrative layout shows a potential mix of 16 three-bedroom houses, they're shown in yellow on this plan, 15 two-bedroom houses, shown in pink, 7 two-bedroom apartments, shown in the darker blue colour, and 4 one-bedroom apartments, shown in the lighter blue. Should an application come forward on this basis, it's considered that this is an appropriate mix of dwelling sizes for the site. The layout demonstrates that parking could be provided for all units to meet the council standards. Other issues, such as details of bin storage, would be required as part of the reserve matters application and could subsequently be secured by condition. The illustrative layout assists in demonstrating that the proposed quantum of development can be achieved on site. It shows that the proposed number of units can be positioned in a way that they will maintain sufficient separation from the site's boundaries so as not to cause a loss of amenity to existing neighbours. It also demonstrates that a layout can be achieved which allows sufficient separation between the proposed development and the protected oak which is located centrally. That's this oak tree here. The current layout was submitted following comments from the tree service, which raised concerns about the original relationship between this tree and the proposed development. The tree service is satisfied that the relationship now shown is suitable and will allow for the long-term health and growth of the tree, given the degree of separation with proposed dwellings and the retention of the open area to the south and west of the tree, which will allow adaptive root growth. The Head of Natural Estates has provided additional advice on this point, which is referred to in the supplementary report, and which is supportive of this potential layout as it indicates dwellings facing towards the tree rather than it being to the side or rear of properties where it's more likely to face pressure from pruning. The report also refers to the need for any future layout to ensure that no dwellings are located within the limited area identified as being subject to surface water flooding at the southern tip of the site. This is in paragraph 9.5 of the original report. An extract from the surface water flood map is provided within the supplementary report and demonstrates that the affected area is very limited, running along the site's southern boundary, and the need to locate dwellings beyond this area will not impact upon the site's capacity to deliver 42 units. As already stated, this application seeks outline permission for the development of the site, with only the issue of access to be determined at this stage. The Highways Authority have assessed the access proposals and are satisfied that safe and suitable access could be provided to serve the development from Gardens Road. A condition is recommended to ensure that the construction of this access is the first development operation in order that all construction traffic uses Gardens Road rather than Mushroom Castle. The exact details of the construction of the access road are secured by condition and require the road's impact upon the protected area of woodland to the west to be taken into account in its design. A Section 106 agreement is recommended to cover, amongst other things, the provision of a turning head at the end of Mushroom Castle within the red line to make servicing of existing dwellings within Mushroom Castle easier, together with the provision of a pedestrian route onto Chavy Down Road, either along Mushroom Castle itself or through the Carnation Hall site. The applicant has confirmed that they are agreeable to these heads of terms. As set out in the report, full protective species surveys have been undertaken for the site. The main dwelling supports a bat roost and therefore a licence from Natural England will be required prior to its demolition. Mitigation measures, including a temporary bat roost through construction, are required and Condition 23 refers. A population of slowworms would be required to be relocated within the site, and a reptile mitigation strategy has been submitted and agreed with the Biodiversity Officer. Condition 29 secures the implementation of these works, and a financial contribution would be secured by means of the Section 106 agreement to compensate for the loss of reptile habitat on site. There are no badger sets on site, although there is evidence that they move through the site. A precautionary approach to construction is required in respect of badgers and nesting birds, and this would be secured by means of a construction environmental management plan for biodiversity by Condition 27. 10% biodiversity net gain would be achieved through an increase in hedgerow units on site and through the payment of a contribution towards an offsetting scheme which would provide any shortfall of BNG off-site. Some concerns have been raised about sewage capacity. However, as set out in the report, Thames Water have confirmed that sufficient capacity is available within the existing system to accommodate the proposed development. Further amplification of this point is made within the supplementary report, which refers to the National Planning Policy Framework, which is clear that planning decisions should focus on whether the proposed development is acceptable in land use terms and should not seek to control matters subject to other legislative regimes. In this instance, the sewage undertaker has confirmed that sufficient capacity exists, and in order to provide further certainty, an additional condition is recommended on the supplementary report, which prevents the occupation of any dwelling until the local planning authority has received confirmation that Thames Water have issued the necessary consents for the required connection. As the NPPF indicates, planning decisions should assume that these regimes will operate effectively, and it would not be reasonable to refuse the current application on the basis of wider concerns about the operation of the existing foul water infrastructure. In addition to previously mentioned issues, the proposed legal agreement would secure 35% affordable housing in line with the emerging local plan requirements, SPA mitigation, and contributions towards infrastructure to serve the development, for example, community facilities and open space. In weighing the planning balance, members will be mindful of the authority's current inability to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, such that the tilted balance is triggered, and permission should be granted unless the adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. It's also a material consideration that the site is a proposed housing allocation within the emerging local plan, which is well advanced towards adoption and which identifies the site as being suitable for residential development for 42 units. The decision to allocate the site was based on an assessment of its landscape characteristics and those of the surrounding area, which concluded that its future development would have a limited adverse impact upon the character and appearance of the countryside. The proposed development provides a range of benefits, including housing provision, 35% of which would be affordable. Any adverse impact of the development is not considered to significantly or demonstrably outweigh these benefits, and therefore approval is recommended, subject to the prior completion of a Section 106 agreement as set out in the agenda and conditions as amended by the supplementary report. And I'll now just show you some photos of the site. So this first photo shows the existing spur at the end of Gardeners Road that would lead into the site. And this is a view further along the proposed access road at the point where it would enter the site. This is a view from within the site, looking back to the same point at the entrance point of the access would be in here, and these are properties within Aldridge Park being visible. This is a view taken from the same point but looking eastwards, and this is the row of protected poplars along the eastern boundary. And this is a view along the eastern boundary with the poplars on the right-hand side looking towards the Aldridge Park northern boundary. This is a view, again, showing the northern boundary, but orientated towards the corner, the northwestern corner of the site where the access would come in. This is a further view of that western boundary, and one close-up showing the oak trees. This view is again along the western boundary, but it's showing the southern part of the site. And this view is actually taken from the land beyond on the western side of the site, which has got the permission for the sang, looking back at that tree screen. This is a view back within the site, looking along the southern or towards the southern boundary, with the new development on the site of the former dwelling known as Collingwood. And this is taken from the same point, orientated and looking due east. And you can just see this is the canopy of the protected oak tree in the centre of the site. This is a view of the same protected oak tree, and it's flanked with conifers which are not protected and which would be removed as a consequence of the development. This is a view showing one of the existing outbuildings and is looking towards the western boundary of the site. This is a view taken from the parking area serving the existing property White Gates and shows the Collingwood development beyond that boundary. And that's from the same kind of position, but showing the existing garage to White Gates. This view is taken from the top of Mushroom Castle. It shows original properties within Mushroom Castle on the left-hand side, the Collingwood development beyond, and this is the garage that I've just shown you the picture of that serves White Gates. That's the Collingwood development at its entry point, and this is the existing property White Gates. This picture shows the access road in front of White Gates with the newly constructed dwellings known as Harvest Moon and Parkside beyond. And on the right-hand side of the photo, you can see the screening that screens the site from Carnation Hall. And this is a final picture taken from within the grounds of Carnation Hall, showing that screening from the other side. And you can just see here that is the ridge of the existing property, White Gates. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So now we need to hear from our public speakers. So could I ask Mr. Compton to come to the desk? Oh, has somebody prepared the microphone? Oh, just speaking from here. Is that okay? Yeah. Lovely. Yes, thank you very much. Oh, I've got it here. Oh, okay. No, I'll do this because.
Yeah, that's on.
Yes, you have 3 minutes to speak.
So I'll speak quickly.
And at 20 seconds before the end, I'll tell you there's 20 seconds left. But well done. I'll carry on speaking. You've got till 3 minutes. So your time starts now.
To approve this application would be a tragedy built on a travesty. There have been 111 objections, but no one seems to be listening. The recommendation states new residential development is contrary to development plan policy, and there would be a level of harm caused to the character of the site and the surrounding area. Reference is made to an emerging plan, but this is not democratically approved. The council states ecological damage would occur and that the area is a habitat of principal importance. On or visiting the site are barn owls, tawny owls, little owls, slow worms, badgers, deer, lesser spotted woodpeckers, bats, frogs, foxes, rabbits, sparrowhawks, cuckoos, insects and small mammals, some being protected species. Some of the trees on the site are protected, but how many times have we seen developers accidentally remove trees? Winkfield Parish Council raise issues. Thames Water, that well-known paragon of virtue, are involved. Flooding and sewage are concerns. Bracknell Forest say the application is likely to result in an adverse effect on the SPA. Works will be hugely disruptive to the infirm, those who work shifts and those who work from home. The applicant claims increased traffic is considered negligible. It is not. Most existing houses nearby have 2 cars, many have 3. There is already extensive street and pavement parking in the area. There would be a massive disruption from construction access, works traffic, noise pollution, dust pollution, and vibration. The area is already a rat run to avoid the traffic lights at Forest Road. Local roads are jammed. The safety of children walking to school and others will be put at risk. The 20-mile-per-hour speed limit is never observed. The design is solely for the purpose of establishing the right to build for profit. This may be legal, but it is not moral and it is not ethical. There would be massive detriment impact to the character of the area, and many house names would become ironic. Meadow View with no view of a meadow, Brockgate Cottage with no Brocks. The entire process seems undemocratic and weighted in favour of the applicant. If Bracknell's better with Labour, and Bracknell belongs to its citizens with its wonderful green spaces, prove it and reject this application. If Conservatives are putting residents first and are committed to retaining open space, prove it, reject the application. The applicants are located in Blenheim Palace. Let them build in their own backyard and not despoil ours. Is this not the unpleasant and unacceptable face of capitalism? Please be a local government, by the people, for the people. Reject this application. Indeed, reject any and all subsequent applications. 10 seconds remaining.
Well done, thank you. Okay, now we must hear from Mr. Pugsley. Can you...
Hello.
Hi. Oh, there you are. I'm looking at the wrong screen. As with Mr. Compton, you have 3 minutes to speak, and I'll let you know when 20 seconds remain, but carry on speaking till I call that's the end if you need to. Okay? Your time starts now.
Chair, members, thank you for allowing me to address you this evening on behalf of the applicant. The planning application before you this evening seeks outline planning permission for up to 42 new homes, ancillary infrastructure and open space with vehicle access from Gardners Road. Members will be aware that the application site is a draft allocation in the emerging local plan and has been considered by the council as being suitable for accommodating up to 42 new homes. The illustrative master plan demonstrates that the proposed scheme can be designed at an appropriate density to respect the existing character of the area and to make an efficient use of available land. Matters relating to detailed layout, landscaping, including the final design of public open spaces and the individual housing plots, will be subject to a future reserve matters application. The proposed scheme will bring about a number of benefits. It will deliver at least 35% of the new homes as affordable housing. The level of provision, tenure, split, size and distribution of the proposed affordable homes will be with accord with policy, and these will be secured by Section 106 agreement. It will also deliver a new area of public open space, and the proposed scheme will provide Section 106 obligations and financial contributions towards biodiversity mitigation, ecology enhancements, and improvements to pedestrian and cycle connectivity. Significantly, the proposed scheme will assist in meeting the borough's shortfall of housing provision and in a sustainable location. In conclusion, the proposed scheme has been carefully considered and will provide a high-quality development reflecting the applicant's desire to create an attractive development of a design that responds positively to the character of the area and deliver much-needed new homes. The planning application is the product of much hard work involving the applicant and the council's professional officers. It is considered that the outline planning application accords with both adopted and emerging local planning policy and national planning policy. Your council's officers also consider this to be the case and have recommended planning permission be granted. We therefore respectfully request that the committee supports the officer's recommendation to approve the application this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pugsley. Right. Now I forgot to ask we need to ask both of the public speakers if there are any questions of clarification. So, can I call you back, please, Mr. Compton? I'm very sorry. Thank you. So, committee, please, do you have any questions for Mr. Compton of clarification? No? After all that? I'm sorry. Thank you. That was nice and clearly. So, Mr. Pugsley, committee, do you have any questions of clarification for Mr. Pugsley, please?
Mr. Pugsley, this is Councillor Mrs. Hayes. It's just, I'm just putting it out there. Why, if you've had so much hard work with the officers, is it just an outline for the road? Why couldn't it have, from the questions I'm going to ask of the officers, could you not have put it all in detail?
Yes, possibly could have put it all in detail at the very beginning. But I think the application is quite old. I think now it's been in for quite a while. What this enables my client to do is, if they intend to build the site out, they have flexibility still over plot sizes, layout, design. So it probably better reflects market conditions really when they get to a point whereby they can commit to a final design, which is quite common. unless they're going to be followed up by reserve matters application, as you'll all be familiar with, and you'll get a second bite of the cherry in that respect. You'll get to consider all those matters of detailed design, scale, in far more detail at that stage.
Thank you, Mr. Pugsley. Anybody else anybody in the committee? Any visiting members? I'm sorry I forgot to ask you if you had any clarification questions. No. Okay. None from anyone. That's okay, thank you. So now questions for the Officers Committee, please. Councillor Hayes.
I'll start it, yes. I will say they were very nice pictures that you presented of the layout of the land. Would you not say that, though, it did not show that there is a definite downfall, a decline in the land? There is a very determined high walk up to. It is not a flat land.
Through you, Chair, if I can. Yes, I think it was clear from the photos that some of them that.
You were on.
Sorry.
Yes.
I think the photos did show that there was a sort of a slope to the land, and it falls away to the southern corner, which is the area which is identified as having a limited amount of surface water flooding. So, yes, and I think we saw that on the site visit as well, that it isn't a flat site. I would agree with that.
Therefore, you agree then that, as you just mentioned, would you not say then with this fall there is problems of bogland, and therefore the design element could be changed or would have to be changed due to these fundamental water problems?
No, sorry, sir. No, I wouldn't agree with that, because I think for two reasons. One, that the design element hasn't been fixed as yet, as we've heard the illustrative layer. It's the layout submitted is illustrative only, and the area that is subject to surface water flooding, as can be seen from the plan that was provided with the supplementary report, is extremely limited, and it's along the southern boundary of the site. And so I don't consider that even applying a sequential approach to the location development within the site, it would have major implications for the location of the necessary location of the dwellings.
Then to carry on from there, if you don't mind, can we then go to page 39, 9.36? You mentioned earlier about the requirements of this creating a turning head. In there, you mentioned it was just for the traffic, and as you state here, vehicles, refuse vehicles. Are you prepared to say that even with this water problem, there won't be a problem with this reconstruction of the turning bay? Because I've looked at it again and I have concerns, but I would ask the professionals.
Yes, the request for the turning head comes from the Highways Authority, and it would be obviously at the end of the Mushroom Castle current road. This is well clear of the area of surface water flooding, which is, as I've mentioned, down the southern boundary of the site. So I wouldn't have concerns about any kind of drainage issues in relation to the creation of the turning head, no.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes. Councillor Barnard.
Thank you very much, Chair. So just in context to this, that in that I represent Whitegrove, there were a number of oak trees located in the middle of green spaces with roads a sufficient distance away from them, and all but one of them has died in the 20 years since the development took place. And I was reliably informed by, I think it was Mr. Polnick a number of years ago, that was because of the stress placed on oak trees. And a little bit of work today has highlighted that oak trees are under significant stress due to climate change. So my question is, if those trees were dying in significant numbers when they were in green spaces, how is it tenable or possible that by placing a road, let's say 9 to 10 metres away from the roots, will actually protect it to an extent where they're under greater stress and strain than they were even 20 years ago? Because for me, the reason I ask this question is because this tentative layout of the site is designed to give the illusion of protecting an oak tree. So I want to understand, given all in practical terms all they've died, how we can be so confident that this tree will survive the sort of work suggested in this outline application. Sorry about the context, but I think it was important to evidence it there.
Yeah.
If I may, Chair, the head of Natural Estates is actually joining the meeting online, and he might be able to provide you with more confirmation on that point.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Yes, please. Head of Natural Estates. I can't see you. Oh, yeah, there you are.
Thank you. I'm happy to support where I may. Apologies, the full extent of the description of the situation did cut out a little bit, so I don't quite know what happened, and obviously I'm not in the room, so couldn't hear that. But I understood the gist of the clarification to be about how oak trees that have suffered on other sites and have subsequently died, how that relates to the treatment of the oak tree in the centre of this development with a road in close proximity. I'm not able to obviously comment on any of the reasons why the other oak trees have failed. That's beyond the scope of what I can respond to. But what I can say is that this development is required to apply and consider the principles in our design statements and the principles within the relevant British standards in accordance with trees in relation to construction and design. And there are guidelines as to how the root protection areas of trees have to be treated, and allowing for those considerations, then there is sufficient room around this prominent tree in the centre of the development to have every chance of thriving in that development. In comparison to an open grown tree that is just left in the middle of a field, then you would obviously argue that development of any sort is affecting the tree, but the question is the extent to which it's affecting it and whether it's reasonable for the judgment that an application has taken due consideration of what the tree needs and applied the relevant standards. In this case, then I believe that the design does allow a good chance for that tree to thrive. It has embodied the principles of our design SPD, which looks to make sure that properties front on to trees and looks to make sure that significant trees are treated as features within a landscape and are surrounded as fully as possible by open space. So in that sense, then the illustrative layout that we're provided with does demonstrate a reasonable consideration of that tree. It does allow it to become a central feature of that development going forward. And as such, given that all other matters would be reserved in terms of the detail of how the road would be constructed, then there isn't cause for a tree objection to this particular application at the outline stage.
Thank you, Officer.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Smith.
Continuing the same topic as Councillor Barnard has raised, I just had a question around on page 36 of the committee report, figure 2. We see the example layout, which shows the various protected trees. In particular, we see what I understand the blue lines around each tree are the extent of the canopies. And my understanding is that the red lines are the extent of the indicative root protection zone. And I just wanted to understand why the root protection zone shown for that oak in the middle appears to be quite limited. It's more or less identical with the canopy compared to some of the other trees which have much larger root protection zones. And are we satisfied that's correct and that's sufficient area? Because if that was a larger zone, that would have quite an impact on the potential layouts of this site.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
I'm happy to respond to that if you're happy for me to continue. The size of the root protection area is governed by a formula based on the stem diameter. So we were comfortable that those calculations have been done correctly and that the areas are correctly shown. And different tree species have different relationships between their crown size and the root protection area. Some trees develop a broad crown and others have a quite columnar form. So it's not always the case that there's a direct relationship between the canopy and the root protection area, but there should be and is a relationship between the stem diameter and the root protection area.
Thank you. That's very clear. Thank you.
Councillor Barnard.
Thank you. Following on from that, so that oak tree that's in the middle of the site and the dotted line round it, relating to the stem diameter and things, does that take into account a number of years proposed growing? Because I know there's been some comment that, roots might go one way but not the other. I mean, how robust is that in the short to medium term? Because I go back, you might have cut out, which was that pretty well all the oak trees in much bigger green spaces on Whitegrove died within the 10 to 15 years after development, despite the fact, in brackets, being protected to a great extent. So, and I remember being told by, I think it was Mr. Polnick at the time, who was the tree officer, that was because as the trees carried on growing, they got significantly stressed because of what was going on elsewhere and they died. So I'm trying to understand how that then goes forward in this context, because I get the point about root and tree and trunk diameter. We saw that on some of the trees there, but that still seems to be very convenient for the one in the middle of the site.
Can I just comment at this point that last week we had 3 trees growing in 2 back gardens that were very constrained by buildings and roads, and they were very healthy and doing well. So you can't honestly tell.
Sorry, Chair. Actually, I was asking for the officer to answer that question technically. I'm sure you will have your opportunity to contribute answers and questions at other points during this meeting.
Barnard.
I'm sorry, no, but this is important.
Thank you, Councillor Barnard. Officer, please.
Thank you. The question was bringing back the comparison between trees that might have failed on a different site to whether this tree would survive and thrive in the situation it has currently. Again, I would say that it's really hard to draw conclusions based on what's happened to trees in other areas because so many things can happen within a development process, and I have no way of knowing what might have caused those trees to fail. There will be things over and above the design of what's gone in around the trees that might affect the long-term health of the trees. And what I would reiterate is that the requirement on a developer is to, or on an applicant, is to apply the relevant British standards, and the size of the root protection area needs to be considered as it is at the time, but also with a reasonable allowance for future growth. And the British standard does allow for the adaptive growth of trees going forward. So it would be appropriate for a road to be located outside of the existing root protection area. It would even be possible and appropriate under the British standard to, with careful construction methodology, run through the root protection area of a tree. It's not a complete rule, but the principle is that there must be sufficient rooting area around the tree that it can adaptively grow into going forwards. I don't know whether that's covered the point raised, but that's the best I can remember.
Thank you, Officer. Can I have Councillor O'Regan now, please?
Yes, Chair. So I understand that we're deciding on the principle of development on this site of up to 42 houses, and we're deciding on the access this evening. Is that correct, Officer?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
Good. So my questions are going to relate to the access part. The site, reading the officer's report, contains the White Gates 2-storey development. That's correct, isn't it?
So the existing site.
It says here 3.1. The applicant site extends to and contains this 2-storey detached dwelling, White Gates.
Yes, that's correct.
That's right. And White Gates is currently accessed through Mushroom Castle.
That's correct.
So that's the current access into the site. Again, reading the report, I infer that the White Gates dwelling is to be demolished.
That's correct.
And replaced by it looks like in outline, three houses which will be an integral part of the development.
Yes, all of which would be access from Gardeners Road.
Okay. The application requires a new access. It's not using Mushroom Castle, and therefore that new access will have an environmental impact on the area. My question is, why isn't the existing access, which is utilised by Whitegates, which will be an integral part of the new development, not being put forward as an alternative access, because it will have obviously less environmental impact than building a new road from the adjacent development?
If I may, Chair?
Yes, please.
My understanding, it's due to the capacity of the existing Mushroom Castle because of its narrowness and possibly visibility, which would not make it suitable for an intensification to serve the additional number of units. But I wonder if we could possibly ask James Turner, who's the Highways Officer, to provide a more detailed response.
Yes, please.
Through you, Chair. Can you hear me? My microphone working okay? Yes, it is exactly that. Obviously, the application you have in front of you is for access from Gardeners Road, but in response to the question, yes, Mushroom Castle does not have the sufficient width and the constraints within it itself. Obviously, I presume you saw that for the site visit at the weekend when you went and looked at the site. It would not be suitable for changes that would be required to it to provide sufficient width and footpath provisions, etc., for an intensification of that many dwellings from it. But obviously in front of you, you have Gardeners Road as the proposal.
Councillor Reagan again, please.
Thank you, Officer. Thanks for the reply. One side of that road is abuts the Carnation Hall. Is that land owned by? Who's that land owned by? So is that land available to make the road improvements, to widen the road?
I'll try and answer that. I don't. It obviously isn't part of what's in front of you. I cannot clarify the exact owner. Obviously, the Carnation Hall itself is operated by the parish council, I believe. But obviously, we haven't got any information about the suggestion you make about is the land available to make any alterations to. So I couldn't give you any commentary on that because it's not part of the red line.
Yeah, it's not part of the application.
So if I just can clarify my sort of line of questioning. So environmental impact is a planning consideration, that's correct. There is an environmental impact because of the new road, and therefore it would seem sensible to, in the application, to consider other alternatives, i.e. the existing access, to see if that could be improved to ameliorate, reduce, remove the potential environmental impact of a new road coming from an adjacent development, which is not really a contiguous development. The natural development is I believe from Mushroom Castle. So that's the point I'm trying to make. Really, it's an environmental impact question. Okay.
Sorry.
I do beg your pardon. I just want people to explain.
Yeah.
I want to explain where I'm coming from on this. Thank you.
Okay.
Chair, did you want me to respond just briefly?
Yes, if you can.
In terms of, we have an obligation to determine the application in front of us. And so in looking at the matter of access, we've looked to see whether or not the use of an access from Gardeners Road would be acceptable. And in this instance, the advice that I'm receiving from the Highways Officer is that it would provide a safe and suitable access from Gardeners Road. So as part of the application, officers haven't looked at alternatives because the purpose of the planning process is for us to determine the applications as they are before us.
Thank you very much. Councillor Boyle, Mackenzie Boyle, I'm so sorry.
Don't worry, Chair, don't worry. Thank you very much. Let's go to parking. I heard the word could provide parking in accordance with BFC standards. And that word to me signifies a risk. that it wouldn't. Would you say, therefore, that that risk could be mitigated by further detailed design and offset on-street parking?
Highways officer, please.
Through you, Chair, I may actually defer to the planning officer first. That's okay, because I think it's a question about the detail where this is the principal outline application. So I'm happy to come back on parking, but it may just be worth some clarification.
If I may, Chair.
Absolutely.
So the illustrative layout that has been submitted, obviously it provides an indicative mix, and this does show that for the mix that is proposed, it is possible to meet the council's parking standards. And obviously, because it's not a matter for determination at the moment, that would be a matter that would be covered by the reserved matters application, that we would look to make sure that there was sufficient parking that would meet the parking standards to serve the development.
Thank you.
I would just echo that.
And just
Because it
echo
is
that, thank you.
those matters and concerns, I think, that are being raised in relation to parking would be subject to the details
Yeah,
at the reserve matters stage.
definitely. Thank you. Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chair. So the officer's report notes that the development lies outside of the existing settlement boundary and discusses the fact that ordinarily that would therefore render the site not considered suitable for development in line with current policy. But obviously goes on to make the argument that the site is allocated in the emerging local plan. And I just wondered if you could just clarify a bit to us the weight that the emerging local plan can and should have in the committee's deliberations, because that is a very developed document, but it is not yet an adopted document. As Mr. Compton quite rightly pointed out, it has not finished going through the democratic process. Before that is policy, it needs to go for another round of consultation on which I'm sure we will hear significant responses from the public around the site allocations in it, and it then needs to be voted on and adopted by full council. It seems to me that a lot of significance is being applied to that. I'm just wondering if we could get some advice about, I appreciate there is some weight to it, but quite how much weight should that have in our considerations?
Yes, clarification, please.
If I may, Chair. So I think that there are 2 points that need to be made. Is one, the weight to be given the existing adopted policies, which show the site to be located within the countryside. And as set out in the original report, it does confirm that the existing policies aren't in full accordance with the NPPF, which is the National Planning Policy Framework, and therefore we can't afford full weight to the existing policies. There's also the matter of the 5-year housing land supply, which I'm very happy to come on to as well. But to answer directly your question in terms of the emerging policy, so the NPPF talks at paragraph 48 that we should be giving weight to policies within an emerging plan in accordance with their conformity with the NPPF and their stage of advancement towards adoption. In this instance, as I mentioned, the policies or the emerging local plan has been through the examination process. The inspectors have identified the main modifications that would be required to make the plan sound, and none of these main modifications relate to the inclusion of this site in LP4 as a housing site, and therefore we need to give significant weight to the emerging local plan. Would you like, sorry, Chair, would you like me just to mention very briefly about the 5-year housing land supply as well?
Yes, please.
That was to be my next question, so
if
thank you.
that's all right. So as set out in the report, currently the authority cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. And again, in accordance with the NPPF, this is paragraph 11, what's known as the tilted balance applies. And that indicates that proposals for housing development should be allowed unless the adverse effects of them significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. And obviously, when we're looking at the adverse effects, we would be looking predominantly at the impact that it would have on the countryside, because that is the policy that currently protects that site. In this instance, as part of the evidence base to the emerging local plan, there is a document that assesses the landscape quality and function of that particular site, and it does identify that it could be developed without significant adverse impact, and therefore that consideration, which was independently come to by an external consultant is something that we would be weighing in the planning balance. So when we're looking at the level of adverse impact, based on the evidence base of the local plan, we would consider that it would be limited. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Smith. Yeah.
Just one final question along that line of reasoning. There's obviously a number of factors there around the weight of the local plan, policies in the MPPF, the lack of 5-year land supply at the moment. If, just hypothetically, if this weren't allocated in the local plan, or if the committee were of the view that the local plan weren't to have so much weight in the decision, is there still sort of sufficient basis in MPPF and due to the lack of the 5-year land supply that you would still recommend this for approval, or is the emerging plan quite critical to your reasoning there?
I think we have to. It's sort of a basket that we're looking at in terms of the weight that we're giving policies. So the fact, I don't think you can, in terms of determining this application, take the emerging local plan policies completely out of the equation. And definitely some weight. You may not accept that it's significant weight, but some weight would have to be accorded them. But back to your main point, when we're looking at the planning balance, tilted as it is in favour of approving the development, I think on the basis of the landscape harm that's been identified in the evidence base to the emerging local plan, we would have to conclude or accept the conclusions that it wouldn't have a significant adverse impact on the character of the countryside as it stands at the moment. And when you are looking at the benefits afforded by the scheme in terms of the provision of the housing, which obviously we need to provide, including the 35% affordable housing, I think it would weigh in favour of approving the scheme, yes.
May I just ask a question myself now before I go to the others? In order to make the road through from Gardeners Road to the new development, there'll be removal of quite a lot of greenery, scrub, little woodland, and I wonder about the effect on the neighbouring trees that are just over the fence in the protected woodland. Can you comment on that, please?
Yes, the vegetation that would need to be removed is along the actual route of the access road is predominantly goat willow and similar sort of self-seeded species. There aren't any significant trees on that area. So, but if you look on the supplementary report, there's a recommendation, an amended condition 5, which relates to the details of the access road, which would be required to be submitted, and that specifically says that these details should take into account the impact of the construction of the access road on biodiversity and arboricultural issues. So, for example, the wildlife site and the protected woodland on the western side of that access road. So if we were receiving an application for details of that access, I would expect it to be accompanied by an arboricultural impact assessment that would look at the impact of the construction on those trees and propose any sort of particular mitigation construction techniques if necessary.
The best way to protect it is not to do it.
Councillor Barnard.
So I think hopefully this is more of a technical question. So, you know, if there are reservations and concerns that we have about the ability to accommodate the 42 units, you know, and the impact on the tree, which we're, you know, entitled to have, we're reliably informed that there's a reserved matter application that comes back at a later stage. Now, the concern that I have is that if we agree tonight, so just if you hear me through, if we agree to the 42 units tonight, but subsequently are not satisfied by the plans because the ability to vary plots and things, my understanding is that there is absolutely no discretion in reducing the number of units, which could be better accommodated if on balance it was felt we needed more protection for the trees. So what I'm trying to understand is, if we have this two-stage process, you know, the reserved matters thing, that what ability do we have to really drill down into this next time if we're not satisfied? Because I believe in the past I'm going to try and use polite language on this, that we have been somewhat stymied, I think is the word I would probably use. There's another one that begins with S, but I'll use the word stymied because of the initial outline application. So, this is why I think there is such huge attention to what's been proposed. Can somebody help me on this? Because I think this really goes to the nub of the issue on this.
Thank you.
If I may, through you, Chair.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yes, please.
So the application is for up to 42 dwellings, and that gives us the assurance, so it doesn't grant a definitive permission for 42 units. So if a reserve matters application was put forward and it didn't provide a satisfactory layout, as an example, in terms of the impact of the trees or on residential properties or other factors, for example, the drainage issue, then it could be refused.
Right.
One more, and then I need to hear from Councillor Penfold.
So, but that further troubles me, because it could be, because of the nature of the site, that actually it could probably only accommodate 38 to allow for more room. But if we actually turned round to the planning committee and said, actually, no, the detailed plans for 42, just were really inconsistent with the issues we're talking about tonight.
Is that a
my
question?
concern is, so the question I have is, can we do that? Because my understanding is we've actually said up to 42. Do you see what I mean?
Chair.
Yes.
It doesn't, because the permission would be on the basis that it's up to 42 units, we would have to have an acceptable reserve matters application before it would be granted approval. And obviously it can be brought back to this committee for full scrutiny.
Thank you very much. Councillor Penfold, please. Could you switch on your microphone, please?
Was on.
Sorry.
Are you sorry, okay. Forgive you. I was concerned about the 42 if we couldn't use certain bits of the site because of the drainage or the tree roots were threatened by things. And I wondered if it can be reduced to perhaps slightly less on the outline.
If I may, through you, Chair. We aren't able to do that because the application is for up to 42 units, and so we have to determine.
Yeah, I thought that was probably
basis.
the case, but I just thought I'd ask. I mean, yeah, it's quite difficult because we do need houses. That's
a debating point.
Well, yeah, but we have a lot of people who need things.
Can we hold that till debate?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's fine.
Okay. Councillor Zaidin and then Councillor.
Just a question. Amongst the objections received from the residents, are there any objections that courts any violation to the local or national planning policies?
Through you, Chair. The objections are identified within both the supplementary report and the main report, and obviously a verbal update. And the ones reported are all valid planning objections. So I don't think I could say that they violate a policy. They're all valid reasons to object to the scheme, which need to be taken into consideration as part of this determination.
Thank you. Councillor Regan. I'm sorry we can't take comment from... Sorry. Councillor Regan, please.
Through you, Chair. Just back to the access. Again, on the report, there is a new development or recent development to the south of Whitegate. So is it approximately three houses? Is that correct?
I believe it's five houses. But
5 houses.
Yes, Collingwood.
So that development did secure access through Mushroom Castle. So the Mushroom Castle Road was deemed wide enough by the council for 5 houses, but it's deemed not wide enough for 42. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair, I'll answer
Yes,
that
please.
one.
Yeah.
I believe it's the Collingwood application that you're referring to. I believe it was we had several applications on that site. I think they've been referred to, the units, the 5 units and the 2 units to the north. As part of the, I believe it was under the part of the 5 units, there were some very minor alterations made to the width of Mushroom Castle. There was a slight widening of around ½ a metre or so to the side of the road, and the junction itself onto Chavey Down Road was altered. But they were very minor in nature to mitigate the scale of the additional 5 units for that proposal.
Okay, but to summarise then, my question is the access was wide enough for 5 houses, but it's not wide enough for 42. Is that correct?
It's not just the width of the access, it's the increase in use by vehicles, others, pedestrians, and considerations you would give to 42 units increase over. I can't tell you the number off Mushroom Castle now, but it's I'm going to say it's in the region of about 10 or 12 units. It's,
Okay.
it's the
Thank you.
increase, and as I say, that's not the proposal we have in front of us.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. So there's been some suggestion that the access that is proposed is via, am I right, is via what's currently an unadopted road, and the developer would need to obviously get permission to create access over that. Is that correct, or is that incorrect?
Through you, Chair,
Yep.
the access is through Gardner's Road as proposed, and Gardner's Road is adopted as part of the original estate for that area. It's Mushroom Castle, which is private and unadopted.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Councillor Mackenzie Boyle, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. This has just struck me. I turned it off. Yeah, it's just struck me, this is like a proof of concept application. Can it go ahead? So I'm wondering why we are spending a lot of time on a proof of concept until we actually do know the number of houses that we are supposed to be debating on.
Officer, please.
Through you, Chair, yes, we are looking at up to 42 dwellings, so you have to consider it on the basis that it could be 42 dwellings, and the access arrangements has been assessed on that basis.
Excuse me. Councillors, please do not have private conversations whilst we're listening to the officer. We ask the officer for information, and we expect to listen. Thank you.
Sorry, did you want something further, Chair, on that?
Was that it? Sorry.
Yes.
That's it. Okay, thank you. I have one more question for myself. In the recommendation, it says that the Assistant Director Planning should be authorised to approve the application when it comes back for have I got that wrong? That the Assistant Director Planning can make alterations subject to what he thinks. In 11.2, can you comment on that? Is that can we ask that should come back to committee?
If I could, Chair, so the recommendation is obviously, it's subject to the Assistant Director having delegated authority to actually issue the decision following the completion of the legal agreement. That's the reason it's phrased in those terms. You're quite correct. It obviously says the following conditions amended, added or deleted as considered necessary. As a matter of practice, we have the Assistant Director has a delegation agreement, but only very minor changes, for example, typographical errors or very minor changes would be done under delegated powers without reference, certainly to yourself.
Thank you. I think this is going to be a very sensitive one. I think that if this goes ahead, we need to ask for that to happen. Can I have any questions from visiting members, please? Councillor Virgo.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. I think the resident mentioned sewage, so let me just ask a couple of questions about sewage, actually. There have been considerable problems in the area with sewage, which are documented and recorded. So I'd like to ask really the planners whether they've had direct conversations with engineers at Thames Water, or whether the information that we see before us, the members see, was just from the developer that's got a standard note from the customer unit at Swindon, please.
If I may, through you, Chair.
Yes, please.
Yes, it wasn't from the developer. It's we consult Thames Water as part of our formal consultation process on any application, and their response was directly to us, confirming that there is sufficient capacity within the existing system.
As a supplementary to my first question, Madam Chairman, is that, just so we understand this, because I think we need to go a little deeper on this, has this actually gone to Thames Water engineers, or is this a standard way that the council uses of just consulting Thames Water at Swindon, I believe, and they'll just say, yes, you have the right to connect under the system?
If I may, through you, Chair, my understanding is that it is reviewed by an engineer or the response. I couldn't tell you exactly the workings of the Thames Water system, but as you know, this application dates from 2019, and we had an original consultation response. Because of the longevity of the application, I went back to them last month and asked for reconfirmation of that point. I initially got a response saying I will contact whoever the relevant officer was, and then they checked back and they said yes. And then in response to a query that Councillor Virgo had, I tried to find out about the routing of the sewer, which is referred to in the supplementary report. And again, I was obviously dealing with someone who was then referring it to another engineer who provided specialist advice that is referred to in the supplementary report. So my understanding is certainly that it's not a standard response. It is definitely site-specific.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Could I also ask, Madam Chairman, does Thames Water, have we informed Thames Water that in that sewer there have been something like 50 other properties connected since the original conversation happened with Thames Water regarding that connection? So the site has changed somewhat over the time because there's been many infilling that's also connected to the same sewer.
Through you, Chair, I mean, obviously Thames Water will be aware of the connections that they've granted permission for. Yes, as I say, I did specifically ask for updated information, and which I would assume is based on their current level of connections.
Hopefully they're up to date.
Yeah. Good luck on that one, Madam Chairman. Yeah. Can I just ask one more question, please, for it? There is now, which I'm grateful for in some ways, a regulation about, I think everyone's got it on the supplementary regarding the sewage, and that we should be confident that any remittal engineering problems are done. But I'd like to ask really the officer, who determines that is sufficient? Do we see specific drawings? Are we going to be allowed, or someone is going to inspect that area, that connection is correct? And I think it's been said earlier that the levels are different from the lower area to the top. So is that a pumping station? How do we actually look at this in the end, please?
Through you, Chair. Yeah. So the conditions on the agenda, and as you said, there's an additional condition on the supplementary report, they require full details of both the surface water and the foul water drainage system to be submitted for approval. And for the foul water drainage, well, for both actually, it has to be in conjunction with the comments from the sewage undertaker, so from Thames Water. So we would consult them when we receive those details, and they would assist us in confirming whether or not they were acceptable or not. In terms of the inspecting them, the local authority doesn't have the resources or the expertise or the need, because it's under a separate regulatory regime, to actually go down and inspect sewer connections.
Right. Councillor Virgo?
Yeah, I'm happy for that. I'll just sum up later, but I'm happy with the question.
Okay. Councillor Gore?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I want to ask 3 questions, please, and some are very straightforward. So, first of all, dealing with the parking provision, 58 parking spaces required, according to the amount of housing that's in the plan. What is the situation with regard to visitor parking?
If I can, through
Yes,
you, Chair.
please, yeah.
So the parking standards have a requirement. There's an element for visitor parking, which is generally 1 space per 5 units. And therefore, when any reserve matters application showing the layout of the development was submitted, there would be a requirement to make sure that they had met that standard, which would include the visitor parking.
Thank you. Moving to a different subject now, actually. A lot has been made of affordable provision, 35%. Given the current situation in the building industry at the minute and the economic viability of builds, is there a chance that provision would be made on another site if viability wasn't as projected?
Through you, Chair, no, we would expect in all but the most exceptional circumstances for the site for provision to be made on site. There's been no suggestion that this site wouldn't be viable to provide affordable housing. I think it'd be highly unlikely because it's a greenfield site, so there are no sort of abnormal costs associated with developing it.
Thank you. My third question is to do with the access. In the 2019 report that the applicant produced in terms of traffic movement, it indicates that there's a give-way point in the access road, and I'm not sure if that's what I can see in the drawing where there's an indent in the road.
I think the James Turner might like to comment further, but having read the transport report, I think it provides 2 options in terms of the Gardeners Road and the spur road, I'm afraid I've forgotten its name, that comes off it, to see which should be the primary access into the site. And so there are 2 options. My colleagues, the highways officers, have looked at it and they have concluded that of those, option A would be the preferable one, and that is where you have the main access coming in from Gardens Road, and then Aldridge Park would be a secondary element of that access. And the reworded condition 5 on the supplementary report refers to that and suggests that the future detailed access arrangement should show option A being used.
The 2019 report indicates there's a movement of 25 vehicles in the morning and 25 vehicles in the evening, out of a total of 250 movements. Given that that report was written in 2019, is it still considered valid?
Chair, if I could defer to the highways officer.
Through you, Chair. Yes, it is still considered valid, and they are the 25 that you're referring to are peak hour movements. So that's the morning peak hour, and a similar number in the evening peak hour for 42 units actually is on the. So 25 movements, both in 2-way, in both directions, in and out, over that relevant peak hour, morning peak hour, and the same in the evening peak hour for 42 units is still valid, considering the location of the site. I think that was the question.
Yes. Can I just ask a further clarification point?
Yes, please do.
Given the fact that the report alludes to some sort of giveaway protocol accessing and departing from the site, is there likely to be a, shall we say, a congested run backing up to Aldridge Park while vehicles depart and access the site?
again through you, Chair, and I think that was possibly part of your previous question, which is I wanted to have the opportunity to answer that as well, because I think you referred to a give way
Yes.
point within the road. What I think you're referring to on that is the illustrative layout and the internal layout of the road, where you can see effectively a slight narrowing halfway into the site access road before you get into the development parcel itself, where you can see the houses. That is illustrative. The design of that access road can comply with the council's design standards in terms of the space, but the exact detail of anything along that road would be considered at the reserve matters. And the reason I say that is because obviously it is a section of straight road. We may wish to look at measures to ensure speeds are kept to a certain level to try and keep speeds in a residential area low. But in terms of congestion, I don't believe it will lead to any further congestion points. That will be part of the consideration. Certainly past Aldridge Park back to the roundabout. I don't believe it will cause any congestion there, no.
Thank you.
Is that okay? Thank you. Okay, I think it's time to move to propose the recommendation that starts on page 46, and the recommendation is to approve, subject to the conditions that could be amended, added or deleted as the Assistant Director Planning considers necessary, but as we've heard, they're minor alterations, if any. Is that seconded, please?
Yes, I'll second that so we can move to debate.
Lovely, thank you. So now I'll take committee members first. You can only speak once, don't forget. Okay. So Councillor Hayes first, thank you.
Are you timing us? Even if it's once?
I will do if it gets,
if it gets too long.
Yeah.
Be prepared. Therefore, let's start out. This is before us an obligation to determine what is before us. I'm absolutely concerned because we're being asked to vote in something that we cannot honestly say we've been given much hard work by the officers and lots of pages. But when we went to that site and then asked the questions about biodiversity, sewerage, but mostly, and did get me, was the incline up, the layout, and it's saying 42. I am extremely concerned that we are rubber stamping something which is giving them the opportunity to do things when we are only asked whether it's the road that comes into play. Don't you think if they were determined for something and they were going to do it, it would have been better to come before us with the outline of the houses and the truth of it, not coming in with it could go up to 42. I have grave concerns about the whole site, its layout, the biodiversity of how it will be handled, the sewerage, let alone to me, we have not been given sufficient paperwork, lots of paperwork, but not to verify what we are being asked to do on that site. I have concerns.
Thank you. And next, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Last night, this council passed a motion moved by myself to give residents a stronger voice in the council's business, to pay more attention to residents, to listen better to residents, to take their concerns on board and to fight for their issues. Residents have spoken quite passionately, and I thank Mr Compton particularly for his contributions to the meeting this evening. And it's very clear from the sheer number of objections that residents are really quite strongly opposed to this and quite concerned of it. It's therefore really with quite a heavy heart that I think we also need to acknowledge the specific role of this committee and the specific terms of reference of this committee. This is not a political committee. This is a the responsibility of this committee is to determine a simple question as to whether the application before us is or is not compliant with the policies. It's clear to me that it's not entirely compliant with the policies in that the existing adopted policies, with it lying outside of the settlement boundary. However, the officer has, I think, explained quite clearly why that is. It is still recommended for approval, particularly with regards to additional policies from the MPPF, which obviously have weight in this situation. The issue around the 5-year land supply, and of course the emerging local plan. On that basis, unfortunately, I do really want to apologise to the residents here. I do feel that I'm going to have to support this, subject to any other points raised by other members in the room before we get to the vote. I could still be convinced otherwise. It's frustrating that this is how the planning system works, that the number of objections, the sheer weight of objections from residents, unfortunately, although it is a consideration, it is not itself, sufficient to reject the application unless we can identify specific planning policies that it's not consistent with. I will say, subject to any further points made by my colleagues, I will be voting to approve this, but I do just want to apologise to the residents that it is because of the specific role, the specific requirements of members on this committee, and it is not because I or any other member are not listening and we're not taking on board the points you're making. I wish the planning system were different. I wish the rules were different and that we had the freedom to make a different choice here.
If you're not listening, don't look at the number, look at the content.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. If that happens again. Councillor Barnard, please.
Yeah, I think just in that, I absolutely recognise the emotion in the room, but there is actually a requirement for members of the public just to listen into the debate now. So I think, Chair, just to say, because, we've been quite clear about that in the past. So if I can start by saying that the purpose of this planning committee is to take a long and I think close look at all applications. And as we might see elsewhere in the agenda this evening, actually holding firm and indicating that what's put before us is not right does actually lead to an element of renegotiation. And I think, I've been on the planning committee long enough to know that there's a whole raft of policies, and you can say quite happily that a site will accommodate some housing, but it doesn't actually have to be what's in front of us. And the only thing I take away from tonight and the site visit, the only certainty is there's great uncertainty and things are illustrative. I expect it's quite inconvenient to any developer to find that there's a beautiful oak tree in the middle of some fields. That doesn't mean to say that we have to accept that up to 42 houses can sit on there, because my long experience of the planning committee is once you say up to something, it can be that number plus. So, I don't take that at any reserve matter stage there's ever been too much revision to those numbers. And that's just a fact of the process as well. It might be this site can take a measure of housing. I'm absolutely not convinced, based on what I saw on the site and what I've heard tonight, that it can be done in a way that actually respects the biodiversity of what's a sensitive site. I think we need to hold firm on that. And I mentioned earlier about oak trees, and I've lived in Whitegrove since 1991, and that estate has grown and built since then. And huge care was taken with semi-mature and mature oak trees in the middle of green areas, so not even roads anywhere near within the route ball. We're talking some cases 25, 30 metres away. And all but one of them in the subsequent 15 years died. Trees that had been quite happily growing there for the best part, in some cases probably over 100 years, had died. And that was when there were large areas around them. And there was no suggestion that you could bring a road up to the root ball. And those were trees that had unrestricted root growth. And I remember at the time being told the reason was that however hard you try, unless you leave a huge area round an oak tree, it won't grow because it will get stressed. And I heard the careful language used, and I don't for one moment, Ms. Chan, doubt all the information about the British standards and things like that, but you could only ever say with the best endeavours. Here we have a site where in the middle of it there is an oak tree. We have been shown illustrative plans to cram 42 houses round it in a manner and a form which would actually bring some measure of development, a road right up to the edge of, you know, what's an acceptable route wall. I just would expect to see something a little more certain, a little more clear, as Councillor Mrs Hayes said earlier, that could give us confidence that what was accommodated there would actually fit in. Because, you know, it's not as if we're talking about an illustrative, you know, outline plan for sort of 300-400 houses like, you know, the Taylor Wimpey one we look at later. This is actually a relatively small scale plan. I do really feel that as a planning committee, we should have that freedom to express our concerns at this point in time and say we're really not convinced, bearing in mind motions that we passed on biodiversity last night, that actually this development in any shape or form, as illustratively presented to us with all the uncertainty it brings, can do that. And that's all I'm asking tonight is, can we not have a second look? Because it might mean what officers say, and I don't for one moment doubt they've come to that conclusion. But look, folks, let's have a go. Let's see if we can further improve that, because the key thing is that biodiversity on that site is precious and special. And if you have to have less houses, well, you have to have less houses. But the bottom line is the residents have spoken, and what is being presented tonight is unacceptable.
Thank you, Councillor Barnard. Councillor Regan?
I defer to...
No, the visitors come last.
Well, I think it's pretty clear from my line of questioning, which is we're supposed to decide on the access, but there seems to be a lack of information, imagination and work on alternatives that don't have such an impact on the environment. I don't think this development fits in with the other development. It seems more natural that it should use the existing access. Again, it seems to have been quite obscure, and we've had to work quite hard to get the information about alternative access. At the full council yesterday, we passed a motion about the climate emergency, but here we have a new access which is going to have environmental impact, and I think we should work much harder to come up with alternatives that have less environmental impact than this one. Thanks.
I think I'll have a go myself first. Shall I do visiting members first? Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I think what I'm most concerned about is if this is approved, the development principle will be given an unretractable blue light. The land has already been brought forward in the local plan, and approval now would bring the developer greater flexibility on reserve matters. It would also give the residents a higher level of insecurity on contentious issues such as density and layout, utility service capacity, and highway safety. This could potentially lead to health and safety issues for existing residents. CO2 emissions will also impact collectively on our agreed net zero 2030 plan. As the site is not transport sustainable, the bus service runs irregularly and not every day. To me, it would make sense to defer this application until the whole application can be considered in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gore. Councillor Berger?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, infrastructure. How many times do we hear it? I've been in this planning committee for several years, and it's the same old problem we face. The truth of the matter, Madam Chairman, is not what Thames Water tell you. And I think anyone actually who've watched the press this over the last few weeks, months, whatever, have absolutely no faith in that company whatsoever. The truth of the matter is that the sewer that takes the effluent from this site runs down Chavey Down Road. Now, there are recorded spillages at the bottom of Chavey Down Road, which is at Brock Hill, over several years. And what happens is Thames Water have to come along, spend a week with a huge vacuum lorry, suck up all the sewage and spray it all down with water, which takes a week. That's happened several times because the sewage flows down the road, because it's a hill going down to Brock Hill. It goes into a pumping station and it eventually goes on to Bracknell Road onto the sewage plant, which we know is in Binfield. So there is total denial from this company. Now, Madam Chairman, I'm not against development per se. What I think is absolutely right, and we should discuss, as Councillor Barnard has made, is that we should not approve something until we're absolutely sure that the system can take it. And I'm certainly not convinced it, nor the residents, because we've been at the other end of sewage coming out. And I have to say, Madam Chairman, that the cut, which is at the bottom, has one of the worst records for sewage overspills of rags, of toilet paper, of actual sewage you can see. Now, if I speak passionately about this, I am sick to death of this country that just can let something go because of regulations, and yet we drown in sewage. This is not right, Madam Chairman. And I would suggest, if we do go forward tonight and members feel that they have to vote for this, I would ask you to go back to Thames Water and see exactly who's going to approve it and exactly for the technical drawings of which they say will work. Because I can tell you now, recently, there is a breakage of a sewage by Don Benny 2 weeks ago, and sewage came all over gardens, across the road and into the ditch. This is not acceptable. And if I speak passionately tonight in this room, I think it's a fair point because someone's got to say it. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Virgo. I'm seeking a bit more information about the sewage situation and whether we can discuss that. Can it be part of our conditions of approval of this outline?
Chair, just to say, there's already a condition in the contained in the supplementary report regarding sewage, and covers the points that Councillor Virgo has just made.
Okay. Since we're told that the points are covered, and we are regulated, unfortunately, by national procedures, the obligation to build more houses comes from a national stance. The infrastructure, well, no comment about the sewer on the national side of things. We have to do our best under the rules to ensure that we have a 5-year land supply, that we comply with the NPPF, and that we look after the oak tree, which I would suggest that it's got lots and lots of green space in this area, that also has a fair bit of water, so it will go and seek the water rather than try and grow under the road. I am concerned about Thames Water, but that's why we're having a scrutiny procedure to do with the Thames Water situation, to make them comply with what they're supposed to do. Indeed, I picked up on something, the last paragraph on page 58, that groundwater risk management permit from Thames Water will be required for discharging groundwater into a public sewer Any discharge made without a permit is deemed illegal and may result in prosecution. They would expect the developer to demonstrate what measures he will undertake to minimise groundwater discharges. Well, if that's from Thames Water, I would want them to put, we require the developer to demonstrate that that will be okay. But that's what we usually accept. Yeah, there was something else I wanted to say. Yeah, the infrastructure concerning schools and GP surgeries. The schools, if we have a need for more school places, Bracknell Forest will reserve land for that, and we have some in various places across the borough where that's happened. Concerning GP surgeries, we've even built places that should have GP surgeries, and this is down to the CQC, which is another issue, a national issue, that our local GPs are rather scarce, and the CQC doesn't have the funding to provide the services. So that's another thing the council cannot do anything about. We can provide space, but we can't force them to fill it. So it's unfortunate that we can't do anything about that. It's very, very frustrating now. I think, much as I am extremely unhappy about this and a number of issues involved, we do have a shortage of houses that we're supposed to have, and we must, I think, accept this and go forward, but we need to be very vigilant of what comes next at every point to make sure this is done properly. That's all I can say. I think we need to put this to the vote. Can all those in favour please show? All those against? That's 5. Unfortunately, I have a casting vote, and I'm afraid that has to go forward, much as I hate to do that. But I promise the residents that we will do everything that we can, if I am chair, to make sure this is done.
Sorry, Chair, that's an additional speech. You have used your casting vote. Those points were made during debate. I think it now rests to the next case. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnard. Yeah. Would the public who are here for that item like to leave the room, and the visiting members? Thank you so much for your input. A comfort break would be good. 10 minutes. We'll return at 23 minutes past. We're about to go live. We have just gone live, so let's move on now to item 7, please. The land west of Maize Lane and east of Old Priory Lane, land parcel 3, Warfield. Can I have the officer's report on this, please? Ah, are you there? Yes. Oh, microphone, yeah. Oh, yes.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, can I just ask a question, Chair? Are we going to, I know, Matt, it's great hearing you. Are we going to hear the whole thing again, or just the changes that were
It's the
requested
abridged
across the
version.
Pardon?
It's the abridged version.
Thank goodness for that, Matt.
Yeah, I had mixed views on the last one. Well, I'm back, so it clearly wasn't that good.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can see my screen okay. My name is Matthew Lunn. I'm the Strategic Sites and Design Team Manager and the Case Officer for this scheme. I'm presenting tonight revisions made to a reserve matters application relating to the scale, layout, appearance and landscaping in respect of 175 dwellings pursuant to outline plan and permission 210/OUT, which includes submission, details related to tree retention removal, tree protection and landscaping. By way of an introduction, at the 20th July 2023 Planning Committee meeting, when this reserve matters application was presented, members of the Planning Committee raised concerns specifically regarding to the appearance of apartment building A, its relationship to Whitegrove Roundabout and existing housing development to the south, loss of vegetation and landscaping proposed. Members agreed to defer the item to allow for further discussions with the applicant around the location, aspect and view of apartment block A to take into account its impact on the Whitegrove Roundabout and whether it could be more sympathetically integrated into Maize Lane and the existing street scene to the south of Whitegrove Roundabout. I'll just show you the scheme now. That's the layout for parcel 3 to which this reserve matters relates. Having worked positively with the applicant to address concerns members raised, an amended scheme specifically focused on this issue is the subject of this report and presentation tonight. It is important to note that this report only supersedes matters related to apartment buildings A and C, minor changes only, in the original report. For all other matters, the original report and presentation remains relevant to this decision and should be referred to alongside this follow-up report. So my presentation now will cover the amendments proposed. So starting on the first one. So just by way of an outline, the applicant focused on 2 main areas. That of the appearance of apartment building A, tree retention and the landscaping around it. With specific regard to this slide I'm showing you now, you can see the original scheme and then the amended scheme below that. We'll focus on the amended. So the changes that have been made are the ridge height has been lowered by circa 1 metre. This serves to break up the roofline and introduce more architectural interest. It accentuates the flanks and the central gable element. I just add at this point that apartment C within the site also has a reduction in the roofline, but all other elements of that building remain the same. In addition, the architectural detailing has been changing to the building to more traditional style. The grey boarding has been replaced with tile hanging and brick detailing, and further architectural detailing has been added to the building, such as LED detailing. On to the second set of amendments. So this is specifically regard to the tree retention and landscaping. Those concerns that were raised previously. The following changes have been made to the area between the apartment building A and Whitegrove Roundabout. Firstly, the apartment block has been repositioned as far north as possible by circa 1 metre. This increased setback allows more room for tree retention and landscaping in front of the building. Secondly, sorry, I'm focusing on the wrong one. This is the previous one, the original. This below is the amended scheme. And you might just be able to work out the alignment of the... sorry, it's a bit slow. I don't think there's much more I can do about that. Okay. Would be the first IT issue that I've had today. According to my laptop, it's sharing, but it's just not appearing up there.
Could I suggest that members turn to page... Oh, no, I've lost it off my screen. Of their agenda pack, which includes those diagrams that Matt's talking about, and he'll be able to talk you through them.
74 and 75, yes.
Let me try leaving the meeting entirely, and then I'll rejoin. Okay. Okay, if we're happy to proceed on that basis, let's do that. I will share my screen again just in case it does decide to pop up again.
It sometimes does after a while.
And if I can just refer you to the relevant section in the report.
Yeah,
So,
page 74.
if I could just refer you to the amended page numbers hopefully on mine, but it's above the conclusion section. Just above the conclusion section, figure 2. So in addition to the repositioning of the apartment building, the PED cycle link that goes from Whitegrove Roundabout to, up towards Maize Lane has also been realigned to create more separation and more opportunity for landscaping to the front of the apartment building. In addition to more landscaping, this has also allowed for some more tree retention. Those trees were initially set to be removed as a result of the original proposal. So, as you can see from the previous one, that's all to be removed with the beech hedge to replace it and Tilia cordata lime trees to be planted in their place. And as you can see here, the beech hedge has been replaced by a hawthorn hedge, and the clump of retained trees that are shown here, that is a purple plum that's individually shown, and that's flanked by some of the ash trees that also have been retained, as much as retained now as possible, allowing for engineering works that are necessary for the pedestrian cycle link and construction of the apartment building. So just to clarify, the number of dwellings, access arrangements, parking, and bin storage and collection arrangements remain the same and are considered acceptable. I'll just refer you now to the amended street sections. So this shows a view from Maize Lane, up Maize Lane, Harvest Ride, and on Whitegrove Roundabout. And then this is the southern view of the principal street that shows the amended roof line on that apartment block on the right-hand side. And this provides for a computer-generated image of the view from Whitegrove Roundabout of the amended apartment building with retained vegetation to the front. To conclude, as set out in the report, proposed amendments are considered to have addressed concerns raised by members, and this revised reserved matters application is considered to accord with the outline planning permission, therefore is recommended for conditional approval. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Officer. Do we have any questions for the officer, please? No? All quite clear? Any... so, yes, I better propose that we approve.
And I'd like to second that, Chairman.
Does anybody have anything they would like to say about this? Thank you. Could we switch off our microphone?
Sorry.
Councillor Barnard.
I'm really pleased with what has actually been achieved by this. And if I can say, Madam Chair, it just demonstrates how if the planning committee holds firm on an issue that they feel strongly about and does it in such a way that we can enter into constructive dialogue with the developer, that we can achieve something which is significantly better than the first proposal. And I would like to publicly thank the officers for the work they have done with the developer to achieve this. And I would like to suggest that officers and members have the courage in future applications to consider similar things. And I think that then fits very comfortably with what the council discussed last night. that biodiversity is important, but not necessarily just on the terms we might have considered, but new ones. And I would ask that actually outside this meeting, in a more policy-driven area, we can actually start to think what that feels like in the subjectivity. And I go back to some comments that are...
Thank you. I think that's enough for that
I don't know, I've got up to 3 minutes, I'm sorry. Because there's some... No, actually, Councillor, this is important. This is in my ward. This is an application which is hugely significant and has a huge visual impact. And I'm saying that based on the feedback that I've had from residents...
Keep it relevant to the application.
As relevant as talking about GP surgeries in the previous application?
Yes, because that was one of the objections.
Right. Let me finish. The issue here is I think this is really good, and I think there's lots of things we learnt from that in a positive and constructive way, and really to say really appreciate the efforts have been made to minimise the impact without detracting from the scale and size of the building, allowing for more mature landscaping. But I think particularly the really good thing that's gone in that is the tightening up on the conditions around the replanting for up to 5 years, the possibility it opens for more native species to go into the hedging, and that actually it's a really good example of modifying judgment. But I have to say, you know, we should also give credit to the applicant as well, who's actually gone away and done this, because there was no obligation on them to do this. And I think actually that shows a willingness to work with. And I think will actually materially change the look and impact of this development going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Collins, please. Also.
Thank you.
Collins.
I'd just like to say that I think two applications we've considered tonight are very different. This was a full application, reserved matters application. The last one was an outline application. This one, I very much welcome the retention of the trees, and I too would like to thank everyone concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. Councillor Regan.
Yes, I'd like to pick up on that, which is we had the resolution at the full council about making our processes more transparent and engaging residents. 2 different applications. I'm still working hard to understand the difference between outline and full, etc., etc. I'm really pleased to see that our process of scrutinising this has had such a positive result, and I'm putting that down, perhaps incorrectly, to our scrutiny of a was it an outline or was it a full application? I'm confused. I really like more clarity on what's coming to the council for decision and its status and what we can and what we can't decide. The other point I'd like to make is this particular landmark building, if I'm using the right phraseology, was objected to by residents in the original application. And you know, I think we need to be more cognizant of where local residents are objecting to things, and we need to work as officers and members to address those concerns with developers. I think we need to be a little bit braver in representing our residents' concerns with these developments. And coming back to tonight's deliberations, we are going to be looking at the full application for the development we've been considering at some length with a great deal of scrutiny, and residents need to be assured of that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Regan. Anybody else wish to speak? No visiting members?
Okay.
Councillor Hayes.
Yes, I am grateful to the officers. It is something when it comes before us and we have actual pictures and layout that we make decisions and not think, oh, it's just an outline, it'll be okay, it'll come back to us. Be prepared. This, I am pleased we had the strength to stand up and ask, could we have it deferred and brought back? Shame about the first one. And thank you, officers.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, very much so for the amount of work you put into it.
Any other members wish to speak? No. Well, to sum up, we're very grateful that the developer was able to come back with a revised plan. And thank you very much, Officer, for carrying that forward. We know it was hugely disappointing after last month's issues. So let us just put this to the vote, shall we? All those in favour? I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right. Yes, thank you. Call Councillor Smith
Chair,
back
while,
in.
while we're calling Councillor Smith back, I think Councillor Regan makes a good point. In the public meeting, we've just sort of suggested that we might not be entirely clear amongst some of the differences between, reserved matters and applications. I think it should be put on the record then that we will organise some additional training, particularly as a new colleague joining the planning committee, because I'm not sure it's a particularly... Do you know what I mean? I think it's important that there's a semblance of competence.
I think the two things that we looked at this evening are incomparable because of the stages they were at
but
and what we were supposed to be looking at.
I think you're missing the point, Chair.
Can we go to the next item, please? I've forgotten what item it is. Item 8. Land for Base Station, London Road.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Will Rendell and I will be presenting this item to the committee tonight. The application is a prior approval application for a 20-metre high mast located on the footway of London Road, replacing an existing 50-metre high mast located adjacent. The proposal will retain existing cabinets associated with the existing mast. The application has been made under prior approval procedure set out within the General Permitted Development Order. The principle of development is established by this procedure, and the only matters that the local planning authority are able to consider are the siting and the appearance of the proposed mast. Moreover, the local planning authority only has 56 days in which to make a decision on the application. In this case, this 56-day period is due to expire on the 2nd of October 2023. I'd like to draw your attention to the supplementary report, in which it's been set out that 29 objections have been received since the publication of the main report. All of these objections are from outside the borough boundary and relate to visual impact and the health impacts which have been covered in the main report. In addition, the supplementary report states that condition number 2 has been amended to read that the proposed material will be galvanised steel. However, since publication of the supplementary report, the applicant has agreed to colour the mast in RAL 7037 dust grey, which is a darker shade of grey compared to the original proposal. Moreover, in the supplementary report, condition number 3 has been added, which requires removal of the existing mast following the installation of the new mast. As mentioned, the only matters for consideration are siting and design. Going through the slides we have here, members will observe that the proposed mast on the proposed site plan is marked here with the...
It's unfortunately we still don't have the...
Let's try.
Don't have view in the chamber. I think we might. It's coming.
In that last screen, the sharing thing. Just
try that. Okay. Share again. Let's try that window. Does that come up?
It's one of those days, I'm afraid, with this system, isn't it?
Right. It's not. Okay.
And I think we all saw it on site.
Okay, I can refer to diagrams from the report if need be. So, if you turn to page 85, the proposed site plan, unfortunately on the presentation I had here, I marked out the location of the proposed mast a bit clearer.
We saw it all on
Oh,
site.
okay, that's fine then.
We all wanted a darker colour.
Okay. So, Oh, now it's turned up.
Hooray.
Right. Just lost my place. So the proposed mast will be sited approximately 12 metres to the south-east of the existing mast, as shown by the arrows here. Members will also note the existing and proposed elevations, which show the proposed mast here with 20 metres in height. This is an uplift of from 15 compared to the existing mast. The proposed mast is considered acceptable on siting grounds due to the existing precedent of masts in this location, with masts having existed in this location since approximately 2011, as shown with the mast that's currently existing. Members will also note there's another mast some 85 metres away to the northwest, further establishing the precedent in the area. Further regarding the site of the mast, the Highways Authority has been consulted and has considered no objection, but has recommended a informative. Now moving on to the appearance of the proposed mast. Whilst accepted, there is an uplift in height of 5 metres over the existing. This would be offset by the fact the proposed mast is relatively slender, with a width of about 35 centimetres in the central section, and this rises to about 70 at the top. In conclusion, it is considered that the proposed siting and appearance of the mast is acceptable and is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions in the report and the supplementary report, omitting the reference to galvanised steel in condition 2. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Officer. Any questions, please, for the officer? Councillor Reagan.
Yes, so just to be clear, so this new mast, the antennas are going to be visible, whereas the old mast, it was sort of covered in a sort of torpedo-shaped covering. Is that correct?
As shown on the proposed elevation, you can see those sort of antennae do sort of protrude slightly from the top of the mast, which, as you've correctly noted, on the old one, the old mast, that was a bit more of a covered section at the top. But I can't comment on the technical reasons for that.
Is that okay?
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from anyone? No? Then I move that that we approve this application.
Second that.
Has anybody anything to say?
Could we try, when we've got them near trees, to look like the squirrely ones? I've put them down at Martin's Heron years ago, and they do match in with them. If you ever have one of those again, but with this, as long as it's darker grey, yes, no problem, Alan.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes. Councillor Smith.
Chair, can I just confirm we're moving the recommendation as per the supplementary report with the additional condition?
Yes, of course. Thank you for that. Yeah. Councillor Reagan, did you have? Oh no, you spoke.
Well, yes, it was just talking about the colour at the site visit. I think there was a consensus that it should look the same as that grey metallic colour of the other mast that was in the area.
Yeah, and that's part of the amendment. Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else? No? Then let's put it to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Thank you very much. That seems to be the end of the agenda. Thank you all for your attendance and your patience with things. And thank you very much to the officers for their patience with everything too, and their help. We'll see you next time. The meeting is closed.